Hey, I'm Rusty.
And I'm Heather.
And we're the Bryants, and this is the Redeemed Marriage Podcast.
We are here to encourage healthy marriages, strengthen wounded marriages, and begin the process of restoration to broken marriages.
We aren't licensed counselors, but we are a redeemed couple that loves the Lord and wants to help you journey through this messy, challenging, and fun part of life called marriage. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Redeemed Marriage Podcast. This is Rusty and Heather Bryant with you, and we are looking forward to continuing our series that we started last week. So last week we kicked off a little series that we're going to do for these first few weeks of the summer. We're basically going to talk about the seasons of marriage and the different seasons of marriage that we go through and kind of how we navigate that and how we navigate that effectively, and just how we things we need to take away from that time, things we need to learn during that time, and then things we need to do to prepare ourselves for the next stage. And as we get started this afternoon, we just want to acknowledge that we know that not everybody follows the same pattern of stages, and obviously the traditional stages for marriage would be, just in general, that you get married, you have some time before children come along. Obviously, not everybody has children. Not everybody is able to have children. Some people enter marriage with children already from one spouse or the other or both. So there's lots of different variables, but we're, the traditional way would be you get married, there's some time that we would like, that I guess people naturally call the honeymoon stage, and then you move into the little kid stage, and then your kids start growing up and they're in the stage where they're doing everything and you're chasing them around, doing all kinds of things that they sign up for. Then you move into the teenage years, and then they start getting out of the house as they go to college. Then you're back at the empty nest stage, and then, it kind of ironically sort of starts all over. You're alone again. Then the grandchildren kind of. So that's just tradition. But we want to recognize that not all marriages follow that pattern. But we really feel like these next few weeks, no matter what stage of marriage you're in, there's something here for all of us to learn. And so today we're going to, at least in our case, rewind the clock a little bit and go back a little bit into that honeymoon stage.
Just a little.
I mean, but you might think we're still in that honeymoon stage.
Of course we are.
Well, that's one thing I think we can talk about, though, is how to keep that type of I don't know how you say it, but the honeymoon stage, how do you carry that over from stage to stage? Because I think that's important. So, all right, let's think back. Let's go back, because there's some people out here that listen to us that maybe they don't have kids right now. Maybe they are genuinely in that honeymoon stage where they haven't been married for very long. They're still figuring things out. And so there's obviously some things that are great about that stage, things that you need to kind of think about and focus on, but then there's also the challenges that come along with that stage. And then what we want to do is we want to make sure that we're speaking to everybody today, where we can say no matter what stage you're in, how can you look back on that honeymoon stage and carry it forward, and then also start looking to when it might cycle back around again. So,
right.
All right, let's go.
Let's do this thing.
All right, so thinking back to our honeymoon stage.
Well, first of all, why do they call it the honeymoon stage?
Are you asking me?
Uh-huh.
Why don't you answer?
I mean, why do they call it the honeymoon stage?
Well, I'm assuming, obviously you get married and you go on a honeymoon and everything is great.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're still Well, some people have disaster stories about honeymoons,
that's right.
I'm sure.
We had partly one of those.
We did. It involved food poisoning. But besides that, there's this, the honeymoon stage, and people call it that because it's just kind of like everything's great. You haven't really faced a lot of the problems that are going to come along during marriage. And those problems are going to come, and they may hit sooner than later. But, for the most part, you've got some time. Who knows how long that time
That's
is,
right.
but it could last years, actually. It could last a few days, and then you get home from the honeymoon. It's like, well, honeymoon's over.
That's right.
And all this is happening now. But there are great things about that stage of marriage. And when you think back on that, what are the things that you think of? Like for us, like what did we do that was, you think back and you're like, man, I'm really glad that we focused on that we learned that about each other, 2 or 3 things. What are some of those?
Well, when I think my question about what is the honeymoon stage, really, I'm asking more of, when you go on an actual honeymoon, like when we went on our actual honeymoon, that was just a week of our marriage. But there was just so much newness to that, I know that not everybody and it's probably not very common now at all, but I don't know that everybody going into their wedding day are virgins. And but for us, we were.
Right.
And so, there was a little bit of anxiousness, and of course there was excitement, and a little bit of fear, like what will he think when he sees all of me, the real me, and I think so much of that can apply to even the first few years of marriage, because on our honeymoon, there was so much revealed about each of us physically and emotionally, and even when you got food poisoning, how you wanted to be taken care of. Like that was just so different than what I imagined it to be. I grew up with the daddy that when I was throwing up, he would sit on the bathtub side while I was, throwing up in the potty and with a cold rag and say, "You're okay. It's okay." And so I'm like, "Oh, well, let me get my cold rag and some water and go make him feel better." And, you were like, "Get out." And so it was just a different idea of what, what I thought it was going to be. But with that honeymoon, our actual honeymoon, there was just so much excitement and so much unknown. Not having to leave each other like we had been, kissing each other goodnight, and then, having to go to our separate homes. I can just remember those moments being precious. And like I said, those just last a week. But then when you come home, I think it's still the honeymoon stage, because there's just so much newness and excitement and having your own place and making decisions that, you don't have to worry about what time to be home if you don't want to, or, there's just so much newness in that I think makes the honeymoon stage a special time, just because you're just getting to know each other just that much better. But with that comes some surprises of, gosh, I didn't expect it to be like that. Or, when we were dating, if somebody started getting on my nerves, or if I started getting on your nerves, you just go to your separate homes. But now we go home together, So just a lot of figuring out each other's quirks. And, we've told people that things that you do while you're dating, things that get on your nerves, they're going to get on your nerves a million times more when you're married.
Magnified.
Everything magnified. But overall, I think it's just a really sweet season of getting to know each other better, just doing anything for each other. Just the newness of it all, I think, is a joy. So I think to answer your question, if I did it all, I think that the newness of everything and the excitement of being together is just really fresh during the honeymoon phase. And I think it's something that needs to be renewed and renewed throughout each stage.
Yeah, and I like, when you say you're just kind of doing everything together, a lot of stuff you're doing, even if you dated for a long time, you're just figuring things out. You're learning each other. You're kind of setting some patterns and things that you're learning what, one spouse is good at and what one spouse is going to have to pick up the slack. I mean, even with, finances and shopping and cooking and, cleaning house, and those are things that hopefully people talk about before they get married, but a lot of times you don't.
I don't know that we did.
I think we knew each other well enough because we had dated for so long that we had those pretty realistic expectations on things like that. But, it is just really a time of, like, you don't want to miss that time of we're going to get to know each other. The intimacy is going to be there, and really you're forming the bond of a team, doing things. And so, the challenges obviously at this stage are most of the time you're working on the start of your careers, putting in lots of hours working. There's not as much money usually at that stage. You haven't established yourself financially. And so, there's those challenges, but as you're walking through and navigating those challenges, it's preparing you for what might come in the future when you have children. And, you like I said, you're forming this bond of a team, and that team is what's going to carry you through all these next stages. So, when you look back on those early years before we had children, like, what are the things that you really think of that were the challenges? Like, the biggest things that jumped out to you as, I wasn't expecting that to be as hard as it was, but, it proved to be difficult.
Well, I think one was when you're single, it's okay for your eyes to be more on yourself. And then, so a challenge for me personally was taking somebody else into consideration all the time. To, it doesn't matter just what I want to do, what is best for that other person, what, just making sure that you take into account what's best for them or what their wants and needs are, and not just focusing on yourself all the time. That was challenging for me. That was very natural for you. It just was. You gave selflessly and thought selflessly a lot more than I did. And I can look back and think, ooh, I should have done that better. Like, I should have, I wish somebody had spoken that truth into my life earlier on in that season. And so that was a challenge for me, to have to give up my wants and my desires, and not big things like my hopes and dreams. That's not what I mean. But just, like, even as simple as where we would go eat or how we would spend our time. Like, it was hard for me to go, oh, there's somebody else to consider.
Yeah. When you think back from today, on to those years, now 25 years later, is there anything that you just think, man, I wish that we would have focused more on that. It would have prepared us better, or, that would have been more enjoyable.
Sure. Well, the first thing that comes to mind is, because it took us so long to have our first child, I think I was consumed with that a lot, where I wish, because you're just thinking, we got to start our family. And I think that I wish that I'd just taken a little bit more of a breath and enjoyed those first few years with it just being us. It's easy to look back on that and think, oh, we could have done this and we could have done that. And we did some amazing things. Right. I mean, we went to London right before we were able to conceive Luke. And I just, that we did things. But I'm just saying, I wish that I had enjoyed that time a little bit more. Because we had things that we enjoyed doing together. And I wish I would have just taken more time to enjoy those, because once you start having children, those times you still get them, but they're just few and far between.
Right.
And so it's like, once I lost them, I was like, oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that would definitely be one.
I think, I'm kind of the same way. I think really, and it's not that we didn't do this, but you just look back on it and you say, man, that was our time to really be spontaneous and adventurous. And like you said, we did that some. We certainly got out of our comfort zone in a lot of areas, but you look back on it and you're almost like, we could have done,
Within reason.
Within reason, and the fact that we didn't,
Have money.
didn't have a lot of money, but we were so free then.
Yeah,
and I don't know that we necessarily took advantage of it because you almost feel like, well, we'll have this freedom forever.
Right.
I think another thing that people might run into a little bit of a situation would be, when you have different hobbies and when you don't have children and you really focus on that and you really don't have a plan for how you're going to handle it once the kids come. Because I do think that there's something out there that I just feel like, one spouse or the other kind of is like, well, I did this when we were in the honeymoon years, and I'm just going to keep on doing it. And then the other one ends up having to kind of stop what they were used to having fun doing. Maybe it was alone, something that was a hobby, but the kids come along and one sacrifices and the other doesn't. And I think that's something that's a pitfall that people need to recognize and talk about before it comes along. Nothing wrong with it. Same thing. If you've got time and you can be adventurous and spontaneous, even with your own hobbies, and there's something you enjoy doing, great. But then you need to recognize when the next stage comes along, be prepared. And be prepared. Life's not going to be the same.
Right.
So you don't need to act like it's okay for one of you to continue on with it being the same and the other one doesn't. Okay, I want to shift a little bit and talk about, I think that a lot of people will say, man, I wish we could go back to the honeymoon stage. And I don't know that it's that people are saying, gosh, when we had kids, everything got hard and we don't really, wish we wouldn't have had kids. And there's not a lot of people that say that. I mean, kids are a massive blessing and ours certainly have been. But the relationship that you have with your spouse, when we move into the next stages, I think so many times our relationship with our spouse changes so much that we get to a point where we just go, the marriage is not like it used to be. How I wish we could go back to the honeymoon stage. So as you start transitioning, you look ahead and now we've got people that are listening to us that have young children. They've got the middle school or, the elementary school age. They're doing all kinds of stuff. Or maybe they got teenagers and they're just in that stage and they might be looking back going, gosh, I wish our relationship could go back to that honeymoon stage. Can it? Even when you're in those stages, can you get that spark back and the feelings that you had for your spouse, so that as you go through these harder stages that may not be just you and your spouse, how do you get back to the honeymoon stage when you're not in the honeymoon stage?
Right. Well, I definitely think that it can be done, but I also know that it has to be purposeful. It just doesn't happen naturally. Because you have to put so much time and so much effort into that happening. And I'm going to go out on a branch right here and you may go, I'm going to kill you. But like sexually, I think that's a big part. People want to go back to how your sexual life was, your sexual experiences were when you were on your honeymoon. Because it was new and it was exciting and it was fresh. And then all of a sudden you barely find time to do anything, And so I think that's just one area where you feel like, things have changed. And especially I think it would be more common for a man to say, oh, I wish we could go back, because now she never wants to do it. And we used to do it all the time and, blah, 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 blah. But I think that just takes being purposeful.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that any of those things that we talk about are so wonderful in the honeymoon stage can continue. They may not can continue constantly throughout your entire marriage and through every season, but there's definitely times in each season where you can get back to that, or just be purposeful in making sure that those things happen.
Yeah, I was even thinking a little bit about how, in the honeymoon stage, we're talking about being spontaneous and adventurous. And, I think there's even sometimes more of an opportunity for that when you do have children, because you really do have to take advantage of the opportunities to be romantic and be intimate. And, sometimes it's funny enough, it is sneaking around a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
and that just kind of adds to
mm-hmm.
Because sometimes when you're in the honeymoon stage, it's like, well, I mean, it's just us all the time. We can kind of do whatever we want to do whenever we want to do it. And then as you get into those other stages, it becomes a little more purposeful. But I think sometimes it also means a little bit more, because you really are having to work at it. There's still the opportunities to be a companion and to be playful and to have a good time together. And you just have to, like you said, you just really have to work at it. And I remember we heard somewhere, if you want to get back to the way things used to be, you have to do things that you used to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so, whatever that is, I mean, in the honeymoon stage, you're still pursuing your spouse most of the time, and you're still trying to be romantic and do the things that are going to impress them. And, whether that's, picking up flowers and bringing them home, or just the constant communication, and just, we can't get enough of each other and being together. And and then all of a sudden we have children, and you think, well, why isn't it like it used to be?
Right.
Well, because you quit doing all the stuff that you used to do.
Mm-hmm.
And you may have to work a good bit harder to make those things happen in the other stages, but you can still make them happen.
Sure.
And if you can do that, then there becomes this richness, like this, you're really having to work at this. And I think people just get tired. They're tired because they have children, and, they're like, the old, I told you back the day I married you that I loved you, and if that changes, I'll let you know.
Yeah.
And
that's
then,
not fair.
Yeah. And then we're like, why do we not feel the same? Well, that's why. And so I do think it's there, there's certainly some things that we did good. I think that right now we probably do that better, and there's a lot of things that we do better to make our life sort of honeymoonish than we even did back then.
Sure.
And but I also really feel like our hearts are being turned by God to this. Guess what? Ironically, you're about to be back in the honeymoon stage. And we've got one kid that's in college, and we've got one that's about to be an 11th grader, so 2 more years, and we'll essentially be empty nesters because they'll both be in college or out of college. And I really feel like God's just, so many people at this stage of their life, it's like, well, it was just our children holding us together for so long, and life gets really hard at that point, and some people just are like, well, we got nothing in common. And I feel like we're kind of the opposite of that. But so much of it is because when we walked through our challenges 10 years ago, and then cancer, and everything changed, and we just changed. And so now we're looking ahead, and we're going, okay, what did we miss out on during those honeymoon years? Because here in a couple of years, we're back at honeymoon stage.
Right.
And people like to call it empty nester, middle age, old age, whatever you want to call it. I like to think we're going to go back into the honeymoon stage. And I feel like we're at a place in our marriage where, and that's going to potentially be the sweetest time of our life.
Right.
So I don't know. You may be going, oh no, I miss my kids. I don't want them to leave.
Of course I'll miss my kids. But I just think it brings new adventures and new seasons in our life, and I'm looking forward to that. I mean, I really am.
Well, the beauty of it is you may not be, most of the people listening to us, they're not in the honeymoon stage anymore. I would imagine that most of the people are somewhere between little kids and empty nesters.
Sure.
So they got children at home, they're listening to this, they're like, not really falling into the stage of the honeymoon. And so my challenge would be, don't ever lose the honeymoon stage. It's not the same. We understand that. But think ahead enough. And I just, we mentioned this last week. I think people don't prepare for the next stage like they're supposed to. So if you're in the honeymoon stage and you're preparing for the next stage, be ready to be a team. Be ready for the challenges that kids are going to affect your marriage. Talk through all those scenarios. Be ready for it. But then as you're moving through those stages, go back and think, what should we have done differently during our honeymoon stage? Let's practice that. Let's figure out how to incorporate that into our marriage now to, rekindle those sparks, whatever has to happen for those emotions to come back like they were during the honeymoon stage. Because if you can get to the end of the kid stage and get ready for the empty nester stage, I really believe that empty nester stage can basically be second honeymoon.
Right. That's right.
And that's what your goal needs to be.
That's right. And I, as I'm listening to you talk, I think about those people out there who are through with the honeymoon stage, quote, the honeymoon stage, and they have regrets. They're like, we didn't do that well. Or the honeymoon stage for us ended the day we came home from our honeymoon. And after that, my spouse was completely different, or, those type of things. Or the people who are, well into the next stages and think, gosh, I wish we could go back to that. And it's just what you said, but I wanted to say again how important it is not to beat yourself up over what happened in the past. If you're past that honeymoon stage, don't go, well, I screwed that up. Just what can you take from that stage, or what do you wish you could have done differently, and bring it into the stage that you're in.
Yeah.
And I know that I do that a ton as a parent. As I see somebody else doing something or read something that is good for parenting, and I think, gosh, I could have done that differently. But that's okay. That's okay. Like you still have moments where you can still incorporate what we're talking about into the season that you're in.
Yeah, and like I said, you said you might have screwed that up, but you're going to get another shot at it. More than likely, things go the way they're supposed to go. You're going to have an empty nest, and you and your spouse, you're going to be more tired because you're older.
That's right.
But most likely, you're going to have more money than you did in that first stage.
And your sleep's not being interrupted.
That's right. And there's so you do get it is almost like a second honeymoon. So my challenge is, no matter what stage you're in, look back at those early years and remember the excitement and say, how can we incorporate that into today's marriage, even on a different scale and a different level, so that when we get to that stage that maybe you're dreading, maybe you're not, maybe you're so excited about being an empty nester, but instead of calling it an empty nester, you're calling it a second honeymoon stage. Yeah. And if you can start focusing things that way and really gearing towards that,
and shifting your mindset.
Yes, I just think that you're going to enjoy this stage that you're in more, and really enjoy that next stage when you get a kind of a second chance at a second honeymoon. So, this is fun because we're living these stages with everybody else, and so I think that, gosh, we just sat here and just talked through this really with no script because we lived it. And now we're getting really close to that next stage. And so it's kind of fun for us to talk about. We appreciate everybody tuning in each week and listening to us. If you've got some questions or some way that we can help you, reach out to us on social media or through our website, theredeemedmarriage.com. And be sure to follow us. Subscribe, whatever. I think following is the term now. But then also rate and review. Those things help us a lot, and it will help us to get our podcast into more listeners. So until next time, we will see you guys next week.